Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bourbon Bites Whiskey Reviews with a Gaming Twist. I'm your host, Clifton, and today we are doing another awesome Thursday night live stream with a very, very special guest. Thank you guys for following along. I know a lot of you guys have been looking forward to this over on our Discord server, so I'm so excited. This has been a long time in the making, and I'm so glad to have our guest that will be on in just a second. But I do want to give a couple shout outs to everyone here in the chat. I see Donnie is here, getting bright and early, showing up. Donnie says, Cliffy, good to see you, Donnie. Donnie's our mod here tonight. He's going to help out with keeping up with the chat and questions and things like that. Also see Eric here. Eric, you're here early too. Good to see you, man. Cheers all. Blind flights are my favorite. Well, we have a really awesome one here tonight, one that I really don't know what to expect from, and that's what makes it so exciting. So I'm super excited to get into that. We're also going to talk about the chance that you guys can get in on this too. This isn't something that was just provided for me because I'm a YouTuber. You guys can all get in on blind flights from this company. So more on that in a second. Whiskey Mountains, Adriana, good to see you. Adriana's been a huge supporter all this time, but also even more so recently, and I'm just very, very thankful for her support. And of course, Nick Proman tuning in right after Adriana, as usual. Good to see you guys here early. If you guys are coming in later on, feel free to say hello. If you're watching the replay, please feel free to leave a comment down below of what's your favorite. Okay, here's a question for people watching the replay. If you've ever done a blind flight, what has been the most surprising pour that you've ever gotten once you realized what it was? I think mine was someone put, what was I forget. I'll think of it later on. I did it on the channel. Actually, recently I did Masters Keep 1 in a blind. I was like, what? How is why did you surprise me with that? Why didn't you tell me I had that? But I'll probably think of it. There's probably been quite a few that have surprised me over the years I've done this channel. But without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guest tonight. Please welcome Bobby DeMars from Blind Barrels. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Hey, Clifton, thank you for having me. I know we've been trying to plan this out for a while, and we had some tastings that got in the way, but I'm glad we were able to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as soon as I heard that you guys, actually, I saw it in a Facebook group from a local Southern California group saying hey, there's this company doing this cool thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to reach out to them. That's such a fun concept. It's something that I try to do for my viewers. But, I'm just one guy trying to send out samples. You guys do it a little bit more officially, which is really awesome. So tell us a little bit about Blind Barrels, how it got started and what was the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, my backdrop is actually I'm a filmmaker. I've made some documentaries. I was a former college athlete. I made a documentary about college athletes' rights, and we changed the laws a little bit. We went to the Supreme Court last summer and got the laws changed so athletes can make money from their name and likeness. And what happens with the film industry is very feast or famine. And when COVID hit, it was kind of a famine time where productions were stopping. And, I'm really a screenwriter by trade. And a friend of mine was doing blind tastings and with whiskey. He's like, I'm going to do a blind tasting with whiskey. And I've done it with wine, but I've never done it with whiskey before. I was more of a drinker than a taster, I'd say. And right after the first one, and it was funny because he did something really cool. Every time he kind of had a theme. One time he did all MGP juices. He threw in interesting curveballs, and I just love the educational component of it. I never really thought about whiskey that way. And so after the tasting, and you're a little bit lifted, and God's going on your cheeks a little bit. And I called him afterwards. I'm like, dude, this is a business. He's like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. And turns out, I'm like, either this is not legally allowed or it's complicated. And turns out it's complicated. If anyone ever needs legal help, just so you know, in anything, you can do a free hour-long consultation with an attorney in pretty much any field. So I did 16 of those with ABC beverage control attorneys. And the first 6 where I'm like, so I want to get some whiskey and I want to make samples and I want to send them out to people. It's like, there's 8 federal laws that you're breaking. You can't do it. The first 6 were like, you can't do any of this. And I went, okay. And then I got one on the phone. She said, well, you know what you could do? You could do this, but you can't do that. So then I took that into the next meeting, and I kept kind of inching my way forward until we found a way to do it that was actually fairly complicated. So created some branding, started a business plan. One of the things that you do, if anyone's ever been involved in a startup, is you bounce ideas off people and you say, hey, what do you think of this? Is this crazy? Am I the only one who thinks this is a good idea? And what happened is 14 out of the 15 people I told were like, hey, if there's a chance for me to invest, I'd love that. I'm like, okay, that's not why I was pitching it, but and then so that's a good and a bad thing in the sense that I know all of my investors really well. And I am the biggest investor in that way. If something bad happens, I'm the one that's going to be hurt the most. So we raised the money. We started all the elements that we had to do to get legally licensed as an entity that can actually create a point of sale. I still consider myself a novice when it comes to drinking. I'm better at picking, younger, grain forward spirits and being able to tell if that's happening. I'm not like, oh, is that candied marzipan in there? I can't I'm not super experienced with that. I always say I know more about liquor laws than I do about the actual tasting process. We shot a masterclass that's free on our site that anyone can go watch. And so I know a lot from just having filmed and edited that. So there's different things that I'm constantly picking up. I'm constantly learning. And even our whiskey wizards, or spirits guides, as I call them, they very much will say that they're still learning as well. So I love this process. I love the educational component of it, the culture. And at the end of the day, we wanted to do something that was really that had never been done before, which is not just the blind tasting aspect, but we want to showcase small craft distillers. So, we're not going to have Maker's Mark. We're not going to have Michter's. We're not going to have, although it'd be great to get like Old Carter or something in there, like pull something maybe down the road as we get bigger.
Sure.
These are all brands that you probably have never heard of. If you try to seek out these bottles, you literally can't find them. So not only do our subscribers, can they try these great, amazing samples. There's 3,000 craft distilleries throughout the country. Think about that. We're in the second whiskey boom right now.
Oh yeah, they're popping up like every day. I hear different ones.
They're all over the place. And I say two of the biggest pushbacks we get is like, well, most craft is crap. And I'm like, not most. Well, if more than 50%, yeah, okay. They're like,
but also we're in the early stages of it, right? Like right now, maybe, but in a few years, maybe craft is going to be just as popular and big as the distilleries that have been around for hundreds of years.
They're doing crafty things. They're like, let's distill it like gin and then put it in a tequila barrel, and maybe that's awesome. Maybe it sucks, right? And one of the things that we do is it's not that somebody can buy their way into our lineup. Nobody's purchasing a spot. Our whiskey wizards, we have a group of people that are at different levels, and everybody weighs in, and we test everything blind. So even if there's something that I know that they like, it's got to pass the blind test before it actually ends up in our lineup. And we get to talk to just amazing small town distillers that have great stories. Some of them have been doing it for 20 years. Some of them have just started. Some of them are sourcing. Some of them aren't. Some of them just have really interesting ways on how they arrived at whatever their mash bill ended up being for that particular SKU. But we're looking for diversity in the mash, the makeup, the location, as much as we possibly can to make this lineup as diverse as possible. And we always say, look, you're not going to you're probably going to like most of these, and you're going to fall in love with one or two is what usually happens. I know that I fall in love with all of them. The ones that end up in the lineup, there's certain things. Some people are like, well, I drink bourbon. Is it all going to be bourbon? We don't want brown sugar caramel like bouncing off of each other nonstop. Some people are like, well, I don't like a rye. I'm going to tell you right now, we have ryes in our lineup that will blow your mind, that defy it's got to be spicy if it's a rye. Not necessarily. It can be fruity. There's all these interesting other things. American single malt is blowing up right now, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's just a category, and everyone thinks, oh, does it have to be smoky? No. There's all sorts of different forms of and expressions of American malt, not only just in how they do it, whether they're drying the barley versus not. The process of what they're doing, and of course, weeded. There's not as much of that in the category out there for the people that love the Pappy and the Wellers and the Larcenys and things like that. Yes, we do have some that we're slotting in. In fact, our first lineup, we might have a weeded in there.
Okay.
We'll find out as we go through it. I'm not going to be drinking the samples. I've had plenty of these, and I've got bottles of them at home. I'm actually going to be trying something of a distillery we discovered yesterday. Okay, we literally went out into a massive city and with a totally ubiquitous distillery name, and found a really rare gem like just in this big city, and nobody's ever heard of this place, and you'd think it was some speakeasy. I thought I hit the Ring doorbell, and I forgot I was being recorded. I'm like peering in. I'm like, is this the murder distillery? Because there's dust and there's things. I'm like, what's happening? And this Hungarian guy shows up in a self-made leather vest. And I'm like, what's happening right now? This is where I get murdered. And I walk into this room and massive, massive stills of varying size. And I'm thinking, okay, this guy is completely unknown in this massive city. And then we start trying his stuff, and we're all like darting eyes at each other, because sometimes we're doing, they're like, all right, this sucks, we need to get out of here. And then sometimes we're like, ooh, okay, how is it that we've never heard of this place ever? And I've even bounced it off a bunch of people, like, you heard of this place? And they're like, nope. So they're probably, I can't talk about them because they're probably going to be in the lineup in the future.
Okay.
Man, this is like, it's amazing. So
That's awesome. So for those of you watching, I'm actually tasting I believe it's the March box that you guys did. Which if you guys are interested, you can actually sign up for this at blindbarrels.com. There's a link down there. This is a quarterly, I believe you said, subscription service or subscription box, where you can get in on that. Now, is the March box still available? Let's say they love the stream and they want to get the March box. Is it sold out or is it still available?
So what happens is, once a lineup happens, it never happens again. So we have
Gotcha.
limited amounts of it. But what we did do was we ordered a lot of the March box specifically because we knew people would want to buy gifts as a one-off and not necessarily buy a gift as a subscription that's reoccurring. So we bought a lot of the March box. So if you purchase a one-off box instead of a subscription, it will be the March box.
Gotcha.
So right now we bought plentiful amounts of this just because we're getting them in restaurants and liquor stores and people that can do blind tasting in other ways other than just as a subscription, and even hotels. We're talking to some stadiums about doing some different things in different ways we can really push and showcase these small brands in different capacities. And just so you know, if anyone wants to get a discount that's listening, you can use Frank Army, okay, in your promo code, and you'll get 10% off anything, merchandise, boxes, subscriptions. One of our partners, a radio personality on 95.5 out in LA, Frank, and Frank Army will get you 10% off anything that you're doing. So if you want to just dip your toe into the tasting world and just see if you really like this experience as much as we fell in love with it, and as much as our subscribers are loving it, once again, it's this curation. So what happens is every 3 months, so mid-March, mid-June, the June box comes out just in time for Father's Day. We didn't time it that way. We just backed up from December. We got a little pushback, like, what about the mothers? And I'm like, love the mothers. I'm like, we love all the mothers. My wife's a mother, and my mom's a mother. Man, I love all these mothers. It wasn't about that. It was because Christmas, December, right? People want to get their boxes in time for December, and then mid-September, June, and then March. So that's how we plan these boxes out. I'll tell you, our June lineup is like, we've got a barrel pick 16-year rye finished in a Weller barrel. So all those taters out there, get a little of that tating going on with that little bit of Weller barrel. And I got to tell you, I mean, it's a barrel proof. It's 125 proof. It tastes like 100. I don't know if the wheat like calmed it down. But these guys are these barrel finish masters. You've never heard of these guys. And the only way you're actually going to get a bottle of this would be if you're a subscriber. We're only going to have probably, what's left of the barrel is maybe like 5 cases. So if you are in our June lineup, I strongly suggest that you taste it early and get that bottle. I'm trying to section off half a case for myself because it's that mind-blowing. And every lineup is just getting crazier. This is a great lineup. It's just phenomenal. What I love about the feedback that we get from people, I was talking to different sets of people, and somebody was like, I loved A. A was my favorite. And then my best friend called me. He's like, I really didn't like D. And then I tried it the next day. It's my favorite whiskey I've ever tried. I'm like, okay.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, that's definitely. And like, I say this all the time on the channel, like, just because you don't like something one day doesn't mean, it's based on like what you ate that day, what you had to drink before. Your palate's always changing. So I always save a little bit of every sample I try, even on the channel. Sometimes I'll come back to it like, hey guys, I know I said some not great things about this. I come back to it. I'm like, actually, I really like that one. So
that's a great point. Yeah. What you ate, and even like, you could be in a bad mood. Like you could just be kind of in a curmudgeon. I think that's what happened with my buddy. He was in a bad mood one day, and the next day he realized, wow, I don't know why, but my taste buds are totally different, within the process. Or
definitely.
Or when you're smelling, it's like, How do you nose a glass generally? Because I do what nobody's supposed to do. I just go deep. I want to.
Oh, I tend to do that. So I said it's like you were talking about earlier about like professional tasting notes. I'm not a professional. I'm just, I guess, an enthusiast. So I just learn as I go. So like I said, I have these samples. By the way, I love the packaging. You'll talk a little bit about that in a bit, probably, I'm sure. But so I have the March box. So if anyone's watching this, it also has the March boxes. Whether you bought the one-off or you save some of your samples, you're watching the replay. I'll be doing these blind myself. Now, as we go along, I'm going to reveal what these are. I have an answer key that I'm going to pull up as we go along. I do want to get caught up in the chat real quick because I noticed we're a little bit behind. So let me. So I was talking about blind flights earlier, like what surprised you. Adriana says, I'm not over the one time a year ago that Knob Creek 9 was last place in a flight. Worst shock ever. So Adriana is the biggest Knob Creek fan, which I'm a bit of a Knob Creek fan too. She was so mad at herself for putting that in the last place. But hey, that's the power of a blind, right? And then Steven Sussmans with a super chat, first super chat of the night. Thank you so much, Steven. He said, hey, Clifton, let's have a fun flight tonight. I think we're definitely going to. A few other people in the house. Trevor Kunkel, good to see you. Emily says, make sure to hit the like button. Yes, if you guys are watching this and you're enjoying it, make sure to hit the thumbs up. It does help out the channel as we go along. I see Slapshots here. Kevin Stoker, which is a name I don't really recognize from a live stream. He says, really enjoying your channel. Cheers. And I'm drinking a Knob Creek 12. Man, there's a lot of Knob Creek in the house tonight. Cheers, Kevin. Thank you so much for that. And then just getting caught up, you guys. Oh man, my chat just jumped ahead. So I'm sorry if I miss anything. Zophir's here. Good to see you, Zophyr. Joseph Brazo is here. Joseph was just on a barrel pick with the Mash and Journey. Hopefully that pick came out great. They do some really awesome picks, so I'm gonna have to check that one out. Chris Tats all the way in Australia. Chris, good to see you. Thanks for tuning in, man. Good to see you this Thursday or Friday morning at Australia time. I can't keep up. I think if I missed anyone, I'm sorry, my chat jumped a bit ahead, so I'm just gonna be Sam caught up. But if I missed you, feel free to say hello. I'm gonna go ahead and get sample A poured in my glass. So like we said, Bobby's drinking a different one. He's drinking a new distillery that he found. Now I saw a question earlier that actually I wanted to address. Adriana asked, my chat jumped and I missed it. Oh, here we go. So these are all from craft distilleries all over the country, or more in one region. So yeah, what about like, is it in general like West Coast, or is it just kind of all over?
The debate on how we figured out our lineup was really difficult. We first started out, you got to imagine that you don't have a live website and you're just telling these distilleries what you're doing. And they're like, how do we know you're not real? Like, why are we doing this process with you? So we talked to probably about 50 distilleries to figure out the first 6 to 8 that ended up being our first 2 lineups. And that kind of evolved a little bit. So there was a limitation within that. Really, it comes down to who's making the best whiskey. So it's possible we could have 4 from one state. And we could down the road do some themes. We could, for instance, do a rye battle. We could do an American single malt. We could do something like that. But we're really trying to look for what's the best whiskey, regardless of where they're from. Like this one, yeah, there's a couple from the same state. There's one, and then there's 2 from 2 different states. And I think we were trying to make sure that we had diversity in this lineup in terms of not just having one type of thing. One of the things that we probably always have to have is a bourbon, just because people want to have that bourbon. And we may not have a smoky American single malt in every lineup. We're not going to just have one in each categories. We could get a blend. We could get a high rye, a low rye bourbon. We could do different mix-ups for that. I think it's not just what's in the lineup, it's also the order, trying to decide what order do we want them to go in. And the only thing I would say in terms of tipping our hand a little bit, you generally don't want to just start off with a barrel proof right off the bat.
Right. Got to work your way to it. Because then it also like blow your palate for the rest of the lineup. So definitely that's an important part of it. It
can. We were talking, we were at a tasting recently, and one of the guys was talking about how he went to Scotland and the whiskey, I'm sure there's a term for it, and I just don't know. Somebody in the chat's figured out that there's it's not the sommelier, it's steward, I don't know what it is. And he made them put the scotch in their mouth for 30 seconds. And then they started tasting it. And the guy's like, my mouth is totally numb. Like, I don't taste anything. It's like Listerine when you get through that, that commercial, you're trying to like get through it. And one of the guys was just pissed and he like walked out. And I'm like, I don't think I would have walked out of the tasting. But, in terms of what that different process is. But if you're starting with the barrel proof right off the bat, yeah, it can kind of create a bit of an issue.
Mhm.
So sometimes we do a bit of a ramp up. I mean, not that these all could be similar proofs. There could be a couple high proofs in there. So a lot of times we want to maybe put those on the back end. That way we're not dealing with that issue.
Gotcha. So I'm on sample A. I just poured here. Joseph, he mentioned about the barrel pick he was doing. He said it was a fantastic pick, one of the best Woodinvilles I've had, and I've had a lot. New patron too. Yes, Joseph is actually one of the newest patrons of the channel. So Joseph, I appreciate you. Joseph has been a supporter for a long time, but I'm so glad to see him on board with Patreon. By the way, patrons, everyone $10 and up. We're still doing our after party tonight. I know it's been a minute since we've done it, so I'm glad to get back into that, and I look forward to hanging with you guys after the stream. So. Thank you so much.
So he did a Woodinville barrel pick.
Yeah, so our friend Jason and Scott from the Mash and Drum, and then my Bourbon Journey, they have a whiskey club, and it's called Mash and Journey, and they just did a Woodinville pick with, I think they had 2 reps. I didn't catch much of the stream, but yeah, Woodinville's awesome. I've had some really good ones from them.
Is there any left of it? I'd love to.
Well, they just did the pick. Usually they come out very soon, so I mean, if anyone's curious, check out Mash and Journey.
Nabbed up quick because Woodinville is just delicious.
Yeah, and then Scott says, "Cheers from Pleasant Valley Bourbon Club. These tasting sets are awesome. Really enjoyed March." So Scott, it sounds like you've already had these. I'm excited to really get into this. And welcome to the show. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, Scott. And I am a new member of the Pleasant Valley Bourbon Club. I think I'm initiated later tonight, believe it or not. So shout out to Pleasant Valley. Yeah, there's a guy named Tony Jones who's this. He says he's new to the whiskey game, but he's this guy that he's like the like the mafia, and there's like these different families and they all meet, and then like there's some guy that knows like the head of all the families, like that's Tony Jones basically. He knows the head of all these bourbon clubs, and he's just one of these guys that he brings a lot of people together. He somehow, when you're bourbon hunting, if you're like, I can't get a bottle of Weller full proof at MSRP, he'll be like, I got you, and then a week later you got it. Like he doesn't want anything. He just loves the camaraderie. And I think that's one of the coolest things that I discovered about whiskey in general is there's this great whiskey at the end of the day is meant to be shared, right?
Absolutely.
And everybody in here, I hope you guys are pouring a glass and you're joining us in this drink.
Oh, they're definitely on like the 3rd glass so far, probably. Now this is
a great drink alone sometimes.
Yeah, it's a great community. Steven said he's actually having some local stuff now. So Steven's based in New York. So he's having some local New York whiskeys. Might be working for the summer. So cheers to you, Steven. And then I see Top Dog is here as well. Cheers to you. And yeah, good to see everyone. Cheers from Nashville. So we have people from all over tuning in tonight. So I've just given this a nose. I haven't tasted it yet, but there's a ton of like honey sweetness on the nose of A.
Ooh. You got it. What do you mean you've never done this before?
I mean, again, I didn't say I've never done it before, but I'm not a professional. I just enjoy whiskey.
Okay, you're just being humble.
Well, to me, it's like a sweeter, like almost like my first guess would be maybe like a wheated mash bill. I don't know if it's a wheat whiskey or like a wheated bourbon, but it's super sweet. I think it has a nice like floral element to it too. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a try. Cheers.
You're picking up on some good notes there.
Yeah, and I know I'm not trying to compete and try to guess what it is. I just recently did a competition here on YouTube called Matt Madness. Our friend Matt over ADHD Whiskey has a competition between all the YouTubers every year. I made it to the 2nd round, did not go on to the 3rd round of it. But it's basically a blind fight. You have to guess the mash bill, the proof, the age. I thought I did pretty well. He kind of screwed with us because the one that I lost on was every single whiskey was Jack Daniels. It was different expressions of Jack Daniels. So it was a rye, it was a single barrel proof. And I was like all over the place. I'm like, oh, that's definitely MGP. Like, no, it was Jack Daniels.
That's the HD part of the HD coming in. He's like, I'm going to make them all Jacks and screw with everybody. It's funny because, Jack Daniels is that drink that you, like for me, I didn't drink it for the last like 2 decades because I drank so much of it in my late teens and my early 20s, right? That there's just that, Jack and Coke. And you don't realize you're just creating this recipe for a hangover with all that sugar.
Oh, yeah. That was my drink in college, too. Jack and Coke was my go-to.
Jack and Coke. So I went to USC and the bar there, it always pissed me off is you would order a Jack and Coke and you would get Southern Comfort and Coke. They would pour the Southern Comfort into the Jack. And I'm like, they're both cheap. Like Southern Comfort's maybe a little bit cheaper. Or what? Like, what are you?
Southern Comfort's so sweet. That and Coke. Oh, that doesn't sound good. I don't know. I haven't had it.
Great. I mean, SoCo and Co is okay, but like it just like I don't know. Jack Daniels is better, but now I mean Jack Daniels single barrel. I just had that or the 10. I mean,
Yeah, I was having this
Pretty well.
conversation with some of my Discord members. I think it was 2 nights ago, and we are just saying how Jack has completely turned around. I don't know if they have someone else that's kind of doing these unique products, but they've changed their reputation from bourbon drinkers being like, "Oh, that's just Jack Daniels," to being like, "Oh no, we're actually really excited about Jack Daniels." And I think whoever did that for the company, like, good for them. They did an awesome job because I love Jack now. I used to say the same thing, like, "Oh, Jack and Coke, college drink," but now I'm like, they do some really awesome stuff.
Do you ever get into that debate where it's like, is Jack Daniels bourbon?
Well, I saw an
Like,
interview with someone from the distillery that basically settled it, and they were just like, "Yeah, we are bourbon, but we choose to identify as Tennessee whiskey because that's like our hometown." So I'm like, "Okay, I'll stick with
that's a
that."
good way to put it.
Yeah,
They're bourbon by definition, but
right.
they somehow got the government to like give them a special designation because they wanted to be special.
Mhm.
So they're technically bourbon, right? But it's that
Right.
one thing.
And then our friend Jim, Pinch Hitter Whiskey Lounge, says, "Cheers, all checking in from Blind Barrel's blackout territory." Is that Maine? I think it's Maine. I got it wrong. I think I said
That's Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. You know what? I said Maine last time, and it was
Yeah,
Massachusetts. I get it
it's
mixed
weird.
up.
Yeah, what would I think Maine would be ME, right? Because then MM is
I felt
Minnesota.
bad because I said he was in the wrong state last time, and I just almost screwed it up again.
Learn your postal system, folks. Yeah, I
I
wish
guess
so.
I
We
know.
weren't 42 states. Unfortunately, I heard you mention Nashville, so we're
Mhm.
not Tennessee or Kentucky. Massachusetts, Oregon, Hawaii, and Alaska are just cost prohibitive. And then there's two others, Pennsylvania, and one other that is escaping me right now. I should just know all these, but there's liquor laws. So we have fulfillment partners that are able to ship to certain states. And so what happens is within the liquor world, there's some states that you literally just can't, like Oregon. You have to buy liquor at a liquor store in Oregon. It's the only way that you can actually get things there. And every
Mhm.
state's a little bit different. One of the things that I learned, is that when prohibition ended, there's a 3-tier system.
Mhm.
So some say prohibition never really ended. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it has to go the distillers, has to pass to the producers, which are the distillers, then to a distributor, and then to the third tier, a retail element, which is we are, before it can pass to the consumer. All right. The direct to consumer laws might change where the distillers can get directly to the consumer. And this is really, if you think about it, why you can't get some of these things. And this is why we're trying to kind of turn the business model, or at least the 3-tier system, a little bit on its end. So there's 3,000 whiskey brands in the country, right? Now, if you go
Mhm.
to Total Wine or Bevmo or the biggest liquor store in town, there's maybe a couple hundred whiskeys on the shelves, right? There's only so much space on the shelves. So you end up in a catalog of a distributor like Youngstown or some massive, they got thousands of brands. Now, does that mean that you're going to end up on the store shelves? No. Some people say that there's a cashola element of paying off boots in the ground or whatever that is. It's a relationship business. So you could have these small distillers that are making amazing whiskey, and they are rock stars within 50 miles, and they can create relationships within their world. But then you literally can't. They get quieter and quieter and quieter. Um,
Mhm.
and you'll see when I start to talk about some of the brands when we do some of these reveals,
Mhm.
um, you'll learn how they're actually starting to get a lot of publicity and becoming a little bit less unknown. But we wanted to showcase these brands and really give them the spotlight so that people can discover that there's some things that go beyond what they can get at their liquor store.
That's why I'm about to get to the reveal of this. Okay, I'm gonna just guess. I'm probably really wrong. I'm gonna say it's a weeded mash bill. Potentially, this is a sourced one from Indiana. Again, I don't know. I don't know if this will show me it either, but I'm gonna show you guys. So all these tasting kits come with a card here that gives you like the tasting notes where you can kind of go along, especially if you're new to it. You kind of get an idea of like which flavor profile you're going for. But there's also a QR code that has the results over here. So this is for the March box. If anyone is watching this that does not want to see the results for the March box, skip now. Here's your warning, because I'm going to be revealing what A is. I'm going to reveal them one at a time as they go along. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. I just want to see a few new people in the chat. Whiskey Reaper, good to see you. Greg McDonald is here as well. And I saw Jim said, yeah, we're a pain in the ass with our laws. He's in Massachusetts. So he said, carve out for beers and wine, but no carve outs for liquor. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting if you look at wine, for instance, in California. Um, the wine industry had a lot of shackles on, and what happened is in the 70s, there was a lot of money out here, and they were able to lobby the federal government to expand their ability to get direct to consumer. And
Mm.
beer has a lot of restraints too. And then whiskey. What we're seeing right now with spirits, just in general, and whiskey's leading the charge. Kentucky used to not be able to ship throughout their own state.
Hmm.
They're now shipping out of the state. They have some states that have reciprocity where they can ship into and out of the states. California is not one of those, unfortunately, but a lot of people within the industry are saying that this is creating momentum towards what happened with the wine industry.
Hmm. Well, and the Kentucky thing, if I believe correctly, it's like within the past year or so that's been allowed, right?
Yeah, it just started last
Yeah.
year, and it's fascinating. It's great because there's more barrels than there are people in the state, right?
Hmm.
So the fact that they can't get these to their own people is crazy.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and reveal what sample A was. So, like I said, there's a QR code on every tasting set. There's a little video where you can go in. They go into each actual whiskey, so they show off the bottles, talk a little bit about them. We're not gonna look at that yet, but if you guys are interested in that, I'll put the link in the chat at the end of the stream where you guys can watch that. But I think we're ready to reveal sample A. So let's go ahead and click this button. Let's see what it is. Oh, okay. Not one I've heard of. 10th Mountain Whiskey and Spirit Company.
So
Okay.
10th Mountain, they're out of Vail, Colorado. A lot of the 10th Mountain. So the 10th Mountain, you have to think about is actually kind of the winter combat of the military. It's actually one of the most deployed military units, maybe the most deployed military unit in the last 20 years. When I first heard it, I'm like going, is this like a James Bond movie where people are skiing and fighting each other while they're skiing? So a lot of these guys that were in this division ultimately ended up in a lot of these mountain towns, and Vail's one of them, where you end up with a lot of people there that turn into ski instructors, and they're experts in many different ways. And Ryan Thompson, the founder of it, really started this company to pay heed to that. I don't know his backstory, and I've talked to him a bunch of times, and I should have gotten into like the backstory of him. But really cool, really laid back guy, and it's interesting because they're mixing, they're aging barrels of different ages, and then they're blending them. So this one just has a really just great unique profile. So you can see
I was definitely wrong with the mash bill. I think the corn was throwing me off. It was super sweet. So to me, I typically interpret that as like a weeded note. I think it's just because it's so like the 75% corn. I didn't get any rye note on that at all.
Yeah, a lot of times when you get that sweetness, it's probably going to be a bourbon,
Hmm.
more likely than not. I mean, wheat is usually this kind of soft, sometimes called a summer sipper. And you're like, I'm going to follow my sarsaparilla with a wheated whiskey as the sun goes down with a cube to get it going. So sometimes there's different vibes going on with different actual just mash bills. Mash bills obviously important. Age statement's important. The types of barrels are important. Yeast is actually an important factor in determining flavor profiles that a lot of people overlook. But yeah, we're big fans of 10th Mountain. And a lot of people bought bottles of that. And I will just point out that if somebody does purchase a bottle through us, one of the things that we don't do, so we create a flat rate for shipping. Shipping always ends up being more than whatever that flat rate is. And we really don't make a ton on bottle sales. I know that seems stupid as a business person, but we're trying to give people access to this. We're not trying to inflate prices because of this, the fact that we're giving you access. We're trying to price the bottles the same that you would if you were literally at the distillery, rather than saying, well, we're going to give you a shipping discount, so we're going to charge more and balance that out and try to kind of trick you. Because if you just go and try to search and find this bottle online, you can see where it is locally at that particular place. This is probably maybe one of the more accessible bottles that has a wider form of distribution. So you can sometimes get these at a Total Wine, not always. Locally, I know this is somewhere in Southern California. You can find these. This is probably the only bottle in our lineup that you could potentially find without ordering through us.
Gotcha. So like I said, this sample set has been out for a while. So this one is sold out on their website. But I assume if you're getting these, as they go live, you'll have more access to these bottles as your box ships out.
Right. And yeah, once a certain amount of time goes by and certain bottles sell out, sometimes we get more of them and we get them more in stock because of the demand. So some of these other ones we sold out and we got more of. We don't have more of that as of this time. And at the end of the day, if you can go find it and visit the distillery or find a way to get it, like we don't have to benefit. This is really about, once again, helping the distillery. We want our subscribers to win. Yes, we want to win. We want to be around for a long time. We want to keep discovering new amazing craft distillers. But go and try it. Go to these places. They got food pairings that are mind blowing. In fact, the next one in the lineup, if you're ready to pour B, get a little rinse out. B is it was the only one in our first lineup that I would say I foisted upon the whiskey wizards,
Okay.
because I know the head of this distillery. They're in the same city where my parents live, and I really did like. I still do. I love their whiskey. It's been a huge hit with our subscribers, so I'm glad that it wasn't like, oh, I foisted this onto our subscribers and then everyone hated it. It's actually been a favorite of a lot of people just in general, and include of different levels and experts. Our whiskey wizard's best friend, who's super cultured in whiskey knowledge, this was his favorite in the sample. And this particular brand, we wanted to just beta test everything in terms of like, all right, how do we price things out and all the different steps. I can't get into all the things that we have to do to actually get this in a bottle.
Well, I was actually, so as I was gonna get into I was gonna start nosing this one, but can you tell us a little bit about? I mean, these look really cool. So these are the bottles, the sample bottles. They're 50 milliliters, I imagine.
These are 50 mil. It looks like 100 because they're big. They probably look like 25 in my hands because I'm a large dude, right? But these are thick custom bottles.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever make custom bottles, it's one of the things that you'll find out when you talk to any distillery is there's an enclosure problem a lot of the time. Bottles that are either get stuck together, they go glass on glass, or corks that don't fit, or corks that expand. In our case, we built the bottles to fit these tamper evident caps, and we got a metal finish on them to keep them secure in place. But yeah, we at the end of the day, whether it's our boxes, our bottles, our caps, I mean everything, we want people to associate these brands with top shelf because in our minds they're just as good. In fact, we did one of these samples we put in a blind tasting that we threw Old Carter in with it, an Old Carter Bourbon, which is like a $400 bottle if you can find it, and it beat out Old Carter in the lineup in the tasting that we did with 12 other people. Yes, Old Carter was hands down number 2. Crushed, right?
Well, that's the thing with the blind. I mean, Whiskey Mountain said earlier her favorite Snob Creek, but in a blind, she ended up putting it in last. That doesn't mean she doesn't like it. It just means in that day and time, that was not hitting the spot.
I did that with my dad when I was trying to sort out the model itself, and I remember I had like Widow Jane and Sonoma, and it wasn't necessarily craft. It was just the concept of he had never done a blind tasting, and I threw Redemption in there. It's $100 Rivalry, and really cool cap and closure thing, and it's kind of like a Grosh. It's got like an interesting like flip up cap that you can put as a hairband, and he put it dead last or second to last out of the 6 that I gave him. And I'm like, what do you think was your favorite? It was definitely that he loved Widow Jane, which I do too. I'm a big Widow Jane fan in general. But you're right. The biases, removing your own biases, we call it label failure. You ever gone into a store and spent a lot of money on a bottle, and you then try it later and you go, this sucks, right? Or I mean, I've done it with wine before. One time I had some Opus One, which is it's a nice bottle, and I left it in the car. Okay, my bad. Okay, and the wine went bad. Okay, but yet you're pouring Opus One, and people are like, it's just got to open up a little bit, and 12 hours later, it's even worse.
Oh no!
No, let's just admit that the wine went bad. Let's just admit somebody made a mistake. It was me, and let's just admit that, right? But there are elements, and people, you will yourself because you spend a lot of money on something, or you associate this brand with something being great, but you don't know what you like. You don't know what your own tastes are. Everybody's going to have a different flavor in this lineup. If you get 10 people in a room, I guarantee, we just did this twice last week, and every single person, there was 10 to 15 people. There was always somebody who had if not more than one. Same thing for each of these. So I personally have my own favorites in this lineup. Kind of all my babies now, right?
Yeah, so I just tried a bit of B. Okay, now I'm conflicted because I thought A tasted like a wheated bourbon, but now that I've had A and know how sweet it was, this next one I'm gonna stick with my guess of wheat. To me, it has that softness that we talked a little bit. To me, this tastes like it has a little bit more age on it. I'm not sure, but I feel like I'm picking up a little bit more, less of the grain forward notes and more of the well-roundedness that I get from something that's a bit older. So I'm going to reveal
on the right track. Absolutely.
Okay, good to hear. All right, let's reveal sample B.
Sample B. This is Drift Distillery in San Clemente.
Wheat. Okay.
And
I've
this
never heard of this distillery, but I did say wheat. So okay, I don't hate myself.
it's 100% wheat. This
Okay.
is a true grain to glass, bottle to farm, whatever marketing term you want to use, distillery in San Clemente. Ryan Winter and his wife, he went out. He actually apprenticed at Dry Fly up in Seattle, I believe, and came back and started distilling. They have a family farm in Kansas. They source all their own grain from their family farm. He grew up on this farm in Kansas, and they bring truckloads of it back. And wheat is not an easy, grain to distill. And there's a reason that there's not a lot of these out here. And yes, this is an amazing, just soft. We were at a tasting last week, and I ran into somebody in the parking lot in a totally different location of the city that was from the other tasting, who bought several of these bottles. And he's like, I gave it to my buddy, and Friday night, sunset, he poured a bottle, and he said it was the best whiskey he'd ever had. If you are ever in San Clemente, the food here is insane. Now, I'm just going to give you a little pro tip. Try to get some of their barbecue sauce to go. Okay. They got to pass all these things before they can make it commercially available. I mean, I think they use like 6 bottles of whiskey just to make a batch of barbecue sauce. It's the best barbecue sauce I've ever had. And I get a massive amount. I get like a tub of it, and it like lasts like 2 weeks. I go through it just because everybody wants it. Once you have it, then I'm doling it out and everybody. But just a great distillery, great people. I mean, they're literally right next to the kitchen. You'll see them with the yeast fermenting and rising and the still. Everything's right there. It's all in one spot, and they're just phenomenal. Just a great. There's nothing better than when you find great whiskey, but it's even better when there's great people behind it. And this is a great example of that.
Yeah, I'm looking. I like that you guys include a bit of the distillery story to meet a little bit the people, because I mean the people behind it are just as important as the whiskey itself. So it's really cool that as people are tasting this, they can read a little bit about it. Our friend Zofer is asking San Clemente, California. Yes. So actually, I'll admit I'm not from California. I live in Los Angeles now. So San Clemente, like about where is that? Is that Southern California? I sound really ignorant right now, but where in California is that?
You know where Santa Barbara is?
Yes.
It's nowhere near Santa Barbara.
Oh, great. Thanks.
So if you're heading to San Diego, if you're like on your way, you're passing through Orange County, right at the tip of Orange County before it goes to San Diego, then you go eventually to Carlsbad in San Diego. It's about 40 miles, 50 miles north of San Diego.
Okay, I've definitely driven through there at some point. I just didn't recognize the name.
it's no. I mean, I'll tell you what, San Clemente is its own secret. It is a sleepy beach town, and it's an awesome. There's time capsule elements of the city. It's maybe one of the best cities ever. And I get to visit my parents. I'm going there next weekend to hang out with them. And I love visiting my parents down there because it's just a great city. And I always swing by Drift. And even though we can, as a liquor license, we get bottles wholesale, I always go by, I buy bottles, and I'm supporting the distillery as much as I can because I'm big fans of them. And they deserve to be. They're making some of the best handmade whiskey in the country. So whether you just blindly buy a bottle and go there, I don't care. Whether you do it and you discover it through us, supporting these craft distillers that are doing it right is really important.
And I think that's great. I have been trying to try as many California-based distilleries as I can. And the thing is, there's a lot of them out here, but I feel like they're, I mean, you kind of mentioned earlier, they're kind of unheard of. Like, people, I don't know if there's just like not enough publicity. I mean, California's all about the wine, right? Why don't we hear of some of these really small distilleries, especially on the West Coast?
We're going to get into one later on that I'm going to talk about that is starting to get some publicity, and what makes them get on that podcast or get Fred Minnick to mention them or whatever it is. We like to think we're part of that zeitgeist, so to speak. At the end of the day, why is that happening? There's more distilleries in California than any other state, actually.
Oh, really? I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there's we stumbled upon one in California that we heard, and we went in, and I swear to God, I thought there was going to be a dude wearing like one of those butcher aprons when I got behind the next wall, and I was like, we got another one.
I got to know where this is. I want to go.
I'm telling you, this place is, I don't even know why they're not. They after talking to the owner, I mean, they're not on any shelves anywhere. And I don't know why. I'm gonna try to get into the backstory of that.
Yeah,
Sometimes
I
you
could
talk
just
to
think of
the
a
store.
handful of California-based distilleries that are actually on the shelves, whether it's a Total Wine or a small liquor store. There's only a handful I can think of just offhand.
Yeah, I mean, there's I mean, there's some up north in Ventura we've talked to. As far as like, I don't want to mention some because they might end up in our lineup
Sure.
uh, down the road. I mean, there's so many like people go, oh well, Kentucky's the only place that you can make bourbon, and that's not true. So bourbon has to be American, right? It does have to be
Mhm.
American. It is America's spirit. Originally, it was rye actually because we weren't far enough west. We were growing rye on the upper East Coast, and a lot of the Irish settlers were making that. Um, it has to be aged in new white oak charred barrels, and it has to be 51% corn. But as you just tasted a bourbon from Colorado, it's pretty
Mhm.
phenomenal. Colorado's doing, you got Breckenridge, and I was just in Denver and visited like 4 distilleries. And yes, they're doing some awesome stuff out there in Colorado.
Mhm.
California's got, they're coming up, and yeah, they're definitely known more for wines and beers, but we're trying to dispel that a little bit. And even though, yes, I'm from California, I am from Southern California. I'm one of the 3% that are from,
That's actually from here.
it's,
Where in Southern California? Are you Los Angeles area or
I was born in the Valley. So if you
nice?
ever watch like a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, Licorice Pizza or Inherent Vice or Boogie Nights, he's a Valley product, so I'm from Woodland Hills and, was born in West Hills. And
Nice. I'm in
it's
Glendale, so yeah, I was in North Hollywood before, so
just off
definitely.
the two, right?
So on
Yeah.
C to me is like it's more of like a minty. I was gonna say it's spicy, but it's like a minty kind of. I don't know. That's definitely completely different than A and B. I mean, that's one thing I got to say. These are all so different on the nose and on the palate and everything. And I think that's good, right? People aren't trying what they're used to. I would probably guess just on the nose this is a rye, but I haven't tried it yet. So I'm gonna try it now.
Someone said I mentioned the wrong USC earlier. You know what? When you're in Southern California, there's only one USC. But yes, when when
I gotta
I'm
side
on the
with her
East
though
Coast,
because I'm from South Carolina, and when I hear USC, my first thought goes to
I
University
know,
of South
right? The
Carolina
Gamecocks. I know we're
Gamecocks.
so solipsistic, over here. Look at me. I said zeitgeist and solipsistic. Look at what we're learning over here at the University of Southern California. But yeah, there is this element. Well, in fact, when we were trying to meet up, I was like, "Oh, what's your time zone?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm out here." And I'm like, "Oh, no way." What do people in LA do? New York people do this too, where it's like, I'll meet you at 5. And then you show up at 5 and they're like, where were you 3 hours ago? And I'm like, we said 5. And
Oh well,
so
see, LA I think is the opposite though. With LA, you tell someone 5, and you're like, oh, traffic, and it's like 5:45, 6, and like,
if they're from here, but like I'm talking to distillers all over the country, and I
okay.
always have to like, I set up the Zoom in their time zone and I'm catering to them. But,
Mhm.
otherwise, we've had some influencers where they're like, let's do a live. And I'm like, oh, how about 5 on Friday? And they're like, great. And they're like, where were you? And I'm like, I was picking up my kids from
Uh,
school.
yeah, I always have to clarify because a lot of I mean I'm dealing with a lot of Kentucky distilleries, so
Mhm.
I'm very thankful for all of them that are able to join me because it's like 10 o'clock their time when I go live, and I'm super glad for them. Actually, I had someone on from Israel recently.
Oh,
He
nice.
joined me at 4 a.m. his time. I'm like, oh my god, you're amazing.
He's committed. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
in the car and I'm like, I'm picking up my son. Come on, Hendrix, let's go. And they're like, "Kid, I'm just sorry that I missed. Yeah, I'm like, I'm trying to FaceTime while I'm driving. I got
Yeah.
off it when I picked up a kid. I put my own life in danger, not my kids. Um,
All right. Okay.
what do you think?
I
You
gotta
think we'll
say,
see?
I would say I like C, but I mean, I'm thinking rye. I could be wrong, but like I'm a fan of rye, so that's kind of what I'm thinking. But let's
So
find
it's
out.
interesting. So you said sweet, but then you went with something that wasn't sweet, and you were right. It was sweet. It was a bourbon. You said
Mhm.
wheat. You were right. You said rye. This is a rye.
Okay.
Now, what do you think
Wait,
in
I've had
terms of
this.
like
I have a bottle of this.
you have a bottle of this? Did you order it
Yes,
through
I
us? How
actually
did you
do.
find a bottle of this?
So I got it from K&L Wine and Spirits here in California. Actually,
Oh,
it came from a recommendation from my friend Jason over at the Mash and Drum. We were talking about him a bit
mm.
earlier. He could not stop talking about this dark pumpernickel rye from Middle West, and I was like, "What?" Like I'd never heard of it. I'm like, "What the heck?" So that's the only reason I have a bottle of it. I know it's not something that a lot of people have. I was like,
I'd
"Does this
say
taste familiar?"
this is one of the more unknown ones that people like. Who the hell are they? Like
Mhm.
Middle West. They're out of Columbus, Ohio. The pumpernickel, what that means is when they're doing the rye, they leave the husk on. Now, I'll tell you, talk about combining great whiskey and great people. They sent us like 6 bottles. They even are like, we're throwing you some bourbon cream. And I'm like, all right, we're not going to put bourbon cream in the lineup. We appreciate it. Every single one of their whiskeys we've tried, and I've tried 7 now, have been just not only insanely good, but completely different. This in particular, I always have a bottle of this at my house because when you get somebody that says, I don't like rye, you pour them a bottle of this and they'll love it.
We have one. The Whiskey Mountains. She says people keep trying to send her rye. Adriana, have you tried this one? Because this one is very different. You probably have because we know Jason's our mutual friend. So this is actually the only thing I've had from Middle West. So do they do just rye or do they do other spirits as well? Do you know?
They do everything. They do wheated. They did an Oloroso OYO, finished the sherry cask that we had in an influencer box. They are the source for Horse Soldier. If you've ever had Horse Soldier, they're out of Florida. One of the Florida cities, one of the many Florida cities, and they're a source for a lot of different places. They make a lot of whiskey,
Gotcha.
but I think the complexity of this pumpernickel rye is hard to beat. Like I said, you pour this for somebody that's anti-rye, you'll change their mind, you'll blow their mind. One sample.
And we have a few people that seem to be fans of this one. Kevin Stoker says Middle West, good stuff from Columbus. Actually, so the Jason guy I was mentioning earlier, he's actually from Columbus. That's I think why he knew about it. Zover says he loves the pumpernickel rye. They said Kevin says they also make a great bourbon too. I'll have to try more of their stuff because I do really like this rye. It's just the only thing I've had from them.
If you find anything, if you're in Ohio, I'm sure they're plentiful. Okay, if you are anywhere and if you see anything that they make, buy it. Okay, because it's gonna be good. I don't care what it is, because we had 6 of their samples in a lineup of 20, and that's the cool thing. We're blind tasting all this, and all of them ended up in the top 10 of everybody. It was just sitting here going like, which one do we choose? And we're like, well, we already have a bourbon. Maybe we have another bourbon. Maybe we have a wheat. Maybe we want to have a rye. And pumpernickel just sounds cool, right?
It does.
Oh, what is that? Is that a pumpernickel rye? Sure is. So sometimes it's just it rolls off the tongue a little bit, right?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it, and I wasn't able to place it as if I'd had it before because I was going into this thing I'd never had any of these, so I guess I'm just weird that I have had this one, but at least I got that it was a rye.
Good, dude. You know what you're talking about. You made a rye that doesn't taste like a traditional rye. You said sweet, but then you said wheat, and you got the wheat. So far, you're crushing it right now.
All right, well, I'm going to move on to D, so I'm not going to reveal this yet. I'm just going to have it up here ready to go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pour D. So tell us a little bit. Okay, so when you're approaching these distilleries, how are you presenting yourself? Like, are you presenting yourself like, hey, I'm just curious to hear like what the process is, especially with these smaller distilleries. Like, how do you go about approaching them and maybe getting them on board with this?
So there's an evolution in the process, and it used to be, we would talk to everybody, and like I'd have my whiskey wizards on, and we would create rapport. And one of the problems with that is, let's just imagine they send us whiskey and we don't like it. So it's this like awkward thing now, right? And I got to call and be like, well, maybe in a future lineup. Because some of the whiskey, either it's not great, the finish is weak. We don't think there's authenticity to the way some people are just, we've been around a year and we just started sourcing, and it's like, all right, there's not really a great story there, and the whiskey's just okay. We're kind of trying to hit every beat possible. So now kind of how it works is, and we have distilleries reaching out to us left and right now, which is great. Is a lot of times I'll do that initial talk with them. And I do give my whiskey wizards, which is Seabass and Christian. These guys, if you guys see, I tag them in all the Instagram posts. I give them full reign. I do weigh in. I do hard nudges. But at the end of the day, they're major in the decision-making process. So that way, if something just doesn't matriculate into our lineup, either because we don't like it or it's too weird, or maybe we are shelving it for maybe some of the next year because we have too much of that in our lineup. Yes, there's no blood on my hands. As I say, I'm like, the whiskey wizards decided. And unfortunately, so the spirits guide said no. But
And
so
Eric in the chat said Whiskey Wizard has to be the best job title ever.
whiskey with, I know we were trying to have like an alliteration, right? I was calling them the spirits guides for a while. I'm like, oh, my spirits guides told me that we might run into some good whiskey. That like, oh, okay, spirits guides, I hear you.
Like
But it was
this being like my spirits guide told me.
right. It was this ethereal being that's me. I'm like, oh, we picked it because yes, thank you, spirit. Yes, good spirit. You remember James, whatever is it? Like one of the guys used to talk to the, like tell people like, does somebody with a C or an R or an N? Do you have a brother or an
I
uncle
don't know.
or
That's the
a
person. I know
brother?
like all those shows where they the mediums or whatever.
South Park was great because they go like enemy with an N or whatever, and it'd be like a C, and he goes, my father had a C in his name. He says hi. And he goes, oh. And it's just like this moment. But James, whatever, he used to always talk when he go, thank you, spirit. Yes, thank you, good spirit. And he would talk to it. But we're getting off track. But the spirits guys, whatever these guys want to talk, it is one of the coolest things if you're going to have that on your actual card, your title. One of the things that we did when we started this company was we said, look, we're not going to have salaries. We're going to do this for the love of the cause. We're going to take everything that we get and try to push this into growing the club bigger. One of the drawbacks of how we operate is there's a limited amount of people that can be in our lineup. So we kind of ran into a wait list issue with March, and then we made it a little bit more in June. So we've only got about 85 spots left for June and our marketing hasn't really hit yet. And then we have to shut it off, and then there's a wait list, and then we kind of, we have to scale a little bit. We can't just sit around on having a bunch of samples. We can't go, oh, let's be prepared for 20,000 people, and then we got 1,500, and then we got all this extra whiskey. So we had to be a little bit smart from a business standpoint. John Edwards, medium dude.
Yeah, I see a few people in the chat.
Other dude that kind of was effeminate, and he had a mustache. There was that other dude. Cross, yeah, I gotta tell you, John Edwards would rope me in sometimes. He would. Like, I don't know if they just had good editing or whatever it was. And then there was Sylvia. See, I know about. She would always show up on Montel Williams. Remember Montel Williams?
Mm-hmm.
One of the
Sylvia. That name sounds super familiar. Like I definitely am more familiar with
Montel
that one.
Williams. I know. Now I'm like aging myself. I'm like when like one of my elders were like, that's like when Billy Barty was with Mickey Mantle, and I'm like, who are these people? I know Mickey Mantle, but
I'm bad with references even with my own generation, so I'm just. But wow,
I'm a pop culture nut. Like, so
I wish I was. I'm awful at trivia. I mean, if you want to challenge me at trivia, you'll win because I'm so bad at it. But I've learned that very quickly.
Trauma trivia? What did you say?
No, I said I'm awful at trivia. You'll beat me at trivia. Just like pop culture trivia, I would just be bad. I see Bill from Dungeons and Dragons is here. So Dungeons and Dragons, if anyone's curious, I do that on Tuesday nights. It is a Dungeons and Dragons whiskey tube version. So I'm on there with Jason, Ed from the Rock Gut Review, Bill, of course, and then Molly from Hugging the Cactus. So y'all definitely tune that in on Tuesdays at 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern. Good to see you, Bill.
So are you big in gaming too? Like not just video gaming, but like board gaming, like because usually Dungeons and Dragons matriculates into, like those different really advanced card games that you play.
Yeah. So here's the weird thing. I have never played Dungeons and Dragons until Bill introduced it to me, and I've always wanted to. I just didn't have enough nerdy friends as a kid. So like I played video games, but I never had a chance to try like Dungeons and Dragons. And now I have played some of the like advanced like card game board games. I've had to learn all of those, like the ones that you sit down for an hour and they're teaching you the rules and you still don't know what's going on, but you play anyways. Definitely been through a bit of those, but I think to me, growing up was mostly video games. Which I'll mention this. We'll talk about video games at the very end, but because I know you mentioned you were a bit of a gamer too. So, but yeah, I'm totally new to Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm loving every bit of it. I'm messing up really bad, but and then of course he says Bob DeMars sounds like a D&D player. You have any experience, Bobby?
I'm like, did you ever see the movie Airheads, where like they reveal at the end, like Adam Sandler, and like they reveal like I was a nerd. And some dude that looks like me, he's like a biker dude. He's like, I played D&D my whole life. So, all right, I'll take that as a compliment. I don't have D&D experience, but I like the fact that it sounds like there's an imagination element, that there's somebody that's leading you on this quest, Almost
Mhm.
like, you gotta be with, if you're gonna do like a mushroom trip, you gotta be with somebody that's gonna lead the trip. It's gonna make sure that it's an enjoyable trip along the way.
Yeah.
That there's
Bill,
some leader.
who's our dungeon master, does an amazing job with that. And I was a bit hesitant at first. I'm like, I don't know if I can like follow like this like role playing thing, but like you get into it and you get to know these characters. And you're like, you know what? I'm just gonna like, especially when you're drinking, it helps out a little bit too. But it's a lot of fun. I
I've
enjoy
done
every
some
single
role
one.
playing before, but not
I mean, same, but like
not
not
rolling
in the
any
D&D
dice.
world.
Let's just put
All
sorry,
right,
baby.
so speaking of D,
Oh,
let's talk about sample D. I don't know why, but this tastes super familiar to me, and it tastes like one of the really strange ones I've had in my life.
mm.
I can't place to me. My guess like malted rye. There's something super familiar about this one, and I feel like this is another one I've had before. I don't know, but this tastes to me super familiar.
This was a diamond in the rough, and I'll tell you, we were talking to a bunch of brands, and some of the distillers we talked to, sometimes they just don't meet our price point because of the way our model has to work. That we're trying to, like, we can't pay over retail in the way that our price ends up working because we then have to charge. So there's some elements that come into that, and we stumbled across this brand through actually Tony Jones. I mentioned the Pleasant Valley Bourbon Club through them. And I'll tell you what, you probably haven't had it or
Okay, I'm gonna throw out a couple guesses just in case I'm right. Okay, only guesses I have so far are like I'm thinking like Old Potrero. I'm thinking like not Barrel Seagrass, but it's very similar to Barrel Seagrass. Maybe Willet Rye, something in that territory, something weird and funky like that. That's just my guess.
You're mentioning all things that are badass. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no, I'm not
Everything
saying that. It's just definitely different. All right, let's go in and
this
see
is
what
high
the
proof. This is 106 proof.
Yeah, I can
This
tell it's the
is
highest proof one for sure.
Corbin Cash.
I have not, but you know what? I've been hearing a lot about this one actually. A lot of other channels have been talking about this.
They're
I know nothing about it. Tell
They
me
are
about this one.
blowing up.
Yeah.
Okay, like I'll tell you right now, you get a bottle of this, it's probably going to worth double or triple in the next 3 or 4 years
Really?
because they only have so much product. The distillery owner David Souza, they're in Atwater, California. They are just north of Merced, in the middle of nowhere. Okay, and
that doesn't sound familiar to me at all. So I know there's an Atwater
I'm throwing out
village
a
near
bunch
me,
of,
but
like Atwater, Merced. Like, let's just put it this way: you got to drive through Bakersfield, and you do
okay,
want
I
to
know where
stop
that
at
is.
Bakersfield. Like, it was like noon, and I was scared looking to, like, I was like going to get murdered getting gas in Bakersfield. Okay, and David Souza, he made some whiskey about 12 years ago, and the first day that his whiskey still produced whiskey, his son was born. His wife's water broke. Basically, his baby's, the water broke on both days at the exact same time.
Wow.
And because his last name is Souza, he couldn't call it Souza because it sounds like a tequila. It's spelled differently than the tequila.
I
And
see.
so he named it after his son, Corbin Cash. And
Very
so
cool.
this distillery, you're going to hear a lot said, these guys.
I like I said, I'm no joke. I've been hearing a lot. I have not had a chance to try them, so I'm excited now that I've tried it.
Bourbon Pursuit just talked about him. Fred Minnick just did. The Pleasant Valley Bourbon Club just did a barrel pick of theirs. They have a 6-year rye. If you can find it, I think it's at Mission maybe. And this particular one, it's funny because some people are put off by it because the higher proof. And so sometimes if you get something that's higher proof it down, put some water.
Oh no, I love high proof, but yeah, you can add water.
You can always add water a little bit, but he was going to create this as a blend. And it kind of, there was a rep from Southern that was there. He's like, what are you doing with this? He's like, oh, I'm going to blend it, right? And he's like, don't blend this. This is amazing. While I was there, actually, in their rick house, they had a new manager there that discovered there were supposed to be 4 years that they got put in the wrong area, and they were 10-year. And so they've got some, maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but they've got some 10-year hidden away. Then I'm like, save me a case. Just don't. I'm going to literally buy. They make, they're a sweet potato farm, and they make probably the best sweet potato vodka. One of our fulfillment partners, Great American Craft Spirits, you can go on there, you can get it. You might be able to get it on Corbin Cash's site as well. I was there trying everything. They make a gin. Everything they make is stellar. They source their grain for this bourbon mash from their neighbor across the street. They're in Farmerstown, and I can't say enough good things about this distillery.
Yeah. So Adriana says they were just on with Independent Joe, which is another great. Actually, I have his class right here. Another great whiskey tube channel here. He says, so he had them on as a guest recently. He said they grow their own Merced rye, and sweet potatoes, which you just mentioned, that they use in their stuff. That's so interesting. I'm gonna have to watch that stream that Joe did. Again, I've heard a lot about them. I've not really looked into them. I gotta say, I like this. It's weird, and I like weird. So to me, like that's a good thing.
It's weird. It's complex. It's just a really cool looking bottle. The only thing I'll say is like they dipped it in the wax too many times, so I gotta like get a knife out every time, or I gotta
it can't be as bad. Oh, I see the photo now. So I'll share it again.
I mean,
it's very intense.
It's a gorgeous bottle.
It is nice. I really like the look of that too. So it's a 4-year-old. This is actually probably one of the older ones we tried in this flight here. It's also the highest proof. I see why we saved it for last.
Oh, I mean, you'll love it. And you know what I think is great when you discover one of these brands is you get to share with somebody and introduce them to something that they haven't heard of. We all have those friends that kind of stay in that circle and they're hunting for the Colonel, they're hunting for the blends or whatever it is. And I have those bottles too. So it's not that I'm against the bigger brands that are making great whiskey. I just love supporting the little guy that deserves to have some notice. And these are all brands that I think are worthy of it. And like I said, the June lineup, it's going to get crazy. This was a great lineup. The June lineup is like just, I mean, I've been kind of testing it out with people in our inner circle, and they're like, where is this? Who is this? And I'm like, oh, you're going to find out.
I was going to say, so this, again, I did not look at any of this beforehand. I'm really impressed with this lineup. I like the variety here. I like that we're trying things that I'd never had before. Smaller brands, some that are gaining traction now. And I can't wait to see what's to come in future boxes from you guys. This was awesome. Now, the one that you've been sipping on, how have you been enjoying that tonight? You still confident about it?
I gotta tell, I don't know. Every now and again, I'm like one of these people that when I eat my meal, like I go, I like make noises, like, people are like, no, it's like big guy likes his food. But this whiskey, we just discovered it, and I'm just blown away by this particular brand. And they're probably going to be in our September lineup because we had one slot. We're kind of battling. We got 3 different ones going for that slot. We've got some amazing female distillers coming up in some of our lineups. I think, we got a little pushback. People are like, why don't you have more female distillers in your lineup? And I'm like, we blind taste everything. We have female distillers in our lineup because they're making great whiskey. Has nothing to do with the fact that they're females. We love that we get to support diversity in all these different capacities at the end of the day, but we're Helen Keller over here, just finding out what, what we actually like, regardless of what our senses and the biases that we already have. We remove them in order to determine this lineup. And what's great about the Whiskey Wizards is like my CFO was this baller. He's like this, like low, like you would never know that this guy is just this awesome, like well-connected dude. He's not a big whiskey drinker, but he loves certain things when we would do a tasting, and that there's some sway there. It's not just like, well, I like this. The barrel pick that we did, we were battling between a ruby port finish and a Weller finish, and we went around. We kept literally, and it was like this 50-50 time. I'm like, what are we gonna do? And it was actually Frank from 95.5 that was the kind of settled the difference on what it was gonna be. And as I said, if you are gonna be in our June subscriber, if you're gonna get a box for June, there's a barrel pick in there that we're gonna have a limited amount of. We always have limited amounts of everything, but this one's going to be particularly limited, mainly because I'm putting a case for myself. I'm like, I'm going to taste this with my son one day. That it's that good. But hopefully when that comes out, we can come on again and you can run through it again, and maybe we do.
I'd love to. I was really, really excited for this, and I'm glad that it held up to all my expectations. I'm really excited to see what's in the future. So he mentioned earlier there's a code scrolling across the bottom here. If you use the code FrankArmy, you get 10% off at blindbarrels.com, and that's for, you said, both the subscription and the one-off boxes.
One-off box merchandise. If you want to get a shirt or a hat, we got the monkey hat right now. We're selling.
I love the hat. Actually, I forgot to grab the hat. You sent me a hat. It's awesome. I love the shirt.
The monkey hat's dope.
I got the Glen here too. Y'all have some really awesome merch.
I always have the delivery guy that like shows up with like whiskey. Sometimes he's like, "Where'd you get that hat?" And I'm like, "Here, you can have the hat." I'm like, just tell everybody about the monkey hat. You know what I mean? All of a
It's
sudden, it
really
turns
cool
into like
looking.
the Obey brand, right? We wanted to
Yeah.
have cool merch at the end of
Well,
the
you
day.
have the box, yeah. So this is the logo that's on the hat. Like it to me, I love it because it kind of looks like I don't know, it kind of gives you like the speakeasy kind of vibe. I don't know. I can imagine this being on the wall somewhere and be like, oh, that's the symbol. Like, hey, this is where you get the good booze at.
We found this designer that the original concept was kind of the see no evil monkey, right?
Oh, okay.
And this designer in Brazil, if anyone ever needs the best designer in the world, that isn't like broken and won't like tear your bank account down, so talented. He had this steampunk monkey that he kind of threw in, and it evolved a little bit until it is what it is now. But what a talented guy. He's a close friend now, and I have some whiskey with him over Zoom. And his daughter translates from Portuguese to English. Like I speak Spanish, and it's like Brazilians don't speak Spanish. It's not
like you pick up random words, but it just doesn't make sense. I actually had one of my weird coincidence. One of my first online friends was Portuguese, which doesn't make any sense. Like, how was she my first online friend? But we would always like voice chat. I'm like, I can pick up certain words that like Spanish. That's all I can pick up. But
I speak a little bit of Spanish. Are we supposed to talk about video gaming at all, or is that a?
Oh my gosh! Okay, yeah. People are commenting. So people are
like,
saying that. Yeah. So hold on. Kevin says, "I love the blind barrels idea. The liquor state to state laws are crushing our souls, though."
I know.
And then Whiskey Mountain says, "I'm impressed they shipped to Utah. Yeah, she's in Utah, so
we had to do some magic to make that happen. But yes.
Yeah. All right. So video games. Okay. So you mentioned a bit earlier you were into not only like retro gaming, but you said you're a parent and you're like doing some gaming with your kid. Is that right?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm playing a lot of like Lego City right now, and
Okay.
like Lego Batman. Like Lego games are problem-solving games, right?
Lego games are awesome. I played a lot of them.
But like have you played Cupheads?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I am so bad at that. It's hard. It's hard. I've even played it like
it's so like below the radar where it's like, oh, I mean, because it's honestly how I remembered video games looking. There was this game called I think it was called Dungeons and Dragons. It was a stand-up arcade game. And it's the animation on this is mind blowing. Now, here's why. It's just you're basically playing an animation, and then at some point you choose a door, left or right. Okay. And if you go the wrong way, then you get killed. And if you go the right way, then you advance. And if you got enough quarters, you can beat the game. Okay.
I feel like I know what you're talking about. I don't think it's called Dungeons and Dragons. I know exactly what you're talking about. I think it's
something like this. Somebody
there's a dragon somewhere in the title. Something like that. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Something like that, right? It's Dragon Slayer.
Someone in the chat might know actually.
Big jaw, and he's like, I got a sword. And so it's almost like what you wanted that game to be. Cupheads is that, where there's this amazing, almost like tattoo style art, but it's a really, 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 really hard game. And
I even played on 2-player, and even 2-player, it's just as hard. Like,
so I got a 4 and a 6-year-old, and so what I spend my whole time trying to keep them alive, because if they die, you can do what's called a parry, and you can keep them alive.
Well, that's a good thing. Yeah, you can bring each other back to life, which is the only saving grace. That's the only reason I can get through that game enough, far enough in the game.
But there's this, you at some point you're battling the devil for your soul. So I'm kind of like, I'm scrolling through some of this stuff. I'm like, oh, who's that? Is that the devil? I'm like, baby, I don't know. We're trying to get past like the stuff that maybe, because it feels like it's for kids, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, come on, like, Wile E. Coyote's trying to murder the Roadrunner all the time. We saw violence as a kid in cartoons, so it's almost like there's this wall. But like the gaming that I like, I'm a run and gun Call of Duty kind of a guy.
Okay, I'm also bad at those.
The problem is, if you don't start playing the game the day it comes out, somebody's already prestige and they're kicking your ass.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm getting called racial slurs by like an 8-year-old, like regularly. And so it's just, there's an element to that game. But I like beautiful games like BioShock Infinite. Just when you have just art that's built into it. What I like about the retro games is there's that element of the cheat codes now. Because back in the day, did you ever hear the Game Genie?
Oh, I absolutely did. I had it on Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64. Like when you plug the game into, and then you plug it into the
game into the game, and it was I had it for Nintendo and Super Nintendo, and you'd be like, I want to be the princess in Mario 2, but I want to have infinite float, and I could just float through the whole thing and you'd beat all the, or like Ghosts and Goblins. I mean, what a nightmare game there's no continuing. There isn't any, like, if you die 3 times, that's it. And you know what sucks about Ghosts and Goblins is if you get to the very end and you battle your way through this, and if you have like a switch and you can save the game along this and you get to the very end, if you don't beat the last guy with fire, start all over. You didn't win the game.
Oh no!
It's like I spent so many hours getting to that, to then, and you're calling the Nintendo hotline. I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. Well, the thing is, I never claimed to be good at video games. I just like playing them. So that's like I know I'm not like a pro gamer or anything. I'm definitely more of a pro drinker than a pro gamer for sure.
I think you're a pro drinker. It sounds like it. You know your tasting notes. You know what you're doing. Yes, he's Zopher's like,
Zopher knows what's up. And then I looked up the game. The game you're talking about earlier, I think it's called Dragon's Lair. I think that's what you're talking about because I've played that before as well. I was like, I know it's got dragons in it, and that's definitely.
You're just making decisions, but when you're watching the animation, you get lulled into this thing, you know. And now there's like, I got the PSVR and I've got Oculus Go, but you know why I bought Oculus Go? It's so I can watch Netflix laying flat in my room while my wife is sleeping. It's so that I don't wake up my wife. You know what I mean? It's the only reason.
Yeah, we're holding out.
So it's the same thing again. Yeah, isn't that bullshit, Zopher? They're like, and then they just make it like harder. Like, you get to play again. It's like Akari Warriors or like, I mean, I had a buddy whose mom bought him every game, even like the worst Nintendo game ever. You know, like he'd have the track and field pad and he'd have every little, like Jaws. There was the Jaws game that was horrible.
I was going to say, it sounded like it'd be pretty bad. Most movie games suck.
Most of the movie games, you know what was interesting? There was a Goonies 2. And so have you ever seen the movie Goonies?
I've seen Goonies, but not Goonies 2. Is it a movie 2 or just
There's no Goonies 2. That's the thing. Okay. The sequel to the movie was the video game, I guess.
Oh, no.
And in the end, you're trying to save Annie, who's like a mermaid. But the damn music from that is so catchy. Okay, the fact that there isn't some like hit EDM mix from like Goonies 2, like the Goonies 2 music, because it's like dun, 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 dun.
I'm gonna have to look into that. Is it like Nintendo, Super Nintendo or something? I gotta look into that.
No, it's original Nintendo, and you know you'll be every time I go back and play an old game, I'm let down because your imagination is always bigger than like what the game was.
Oh yeah, that's like there's the nostalgia element, but when you're playing something that's from that era, but you've never played before, I get that feeling too. It's like, what is this? Why was this popular?
For me, it's the music. The music just dials you right back in, whether it's like Dr. Mario, whatever it is that like you go, oh my God, this music, this is this song that you played a million. Like the music that you got playing at the bit at your beginning of your show is dope. I'm like, what is this? This is like a Stallone vehicle. This is like Cobra from 1986 or something. That's the
vibe I'm going for. The whole 80s
action thriller, like where there's this synth pop going, like Stallone take somebody's face off with a fist today, you know?
Yeah. Well, Chris said he had Dragon's Lair on his Commodore 64. Zover says Jaws was notorious for the terrible hit spots on the harpoon level.
It was impossible. It was just like it was like trying to be Tyson. I mean, everyone's played like, you know, and you would get the code. Somebody would get to the thing, so you get the code. And Tyson would come out like, you think you're gonna beat me? And this was like right before like the whole rape scandal happened, and like he would get to the thing with Tyson, and he had his like tell on when to juke was so quick that if you didn't react, and it just one punch, he'd knock you out.
Oh yeah, yep. I definitely have not done well in that game.
Without the cheap codes. Up and just get to the second round, you know. Yeah, I can only beat it like now because I can save to a certain point. Like, I just hit Mike Tyson in the face like 3 times. Like, I'm going to save this right now on my Switch, and then I'm going to come back and play it again so I can actually beat him.
So Kevin says, like he quoted me, I'm a pro drinker more than a pro gamer. Unironically, but also ironically, I actually have merch on my store that says Bourbon Bites Pro Drinker as like a Tony Hawk Pro Skater game. That's kind of tribute to that. I have a shirt for that. So Kevin, if you like that, check out the shirt. All right, I know some people are popping in now. I know we're going a little overtime. I see Fred's here, Donald's here. Thank y'all for tuning in. Bobby, thank you so much for coming on. This was so much fun. I can't wait to see what's next for Blind Barrels.
Oh, thank you.
Where can people find you guys? I know on Instagram you mentioned, is it just Blind Barrels on Instagram?
Yeah, we're Blind Barrels on everything. We're trying to get our TikTok game up. So you kids and your tickety-tocketies and your things. So Blind Barrels on all our handles for everything, blindbarrels.com. Obviously, you guys can use this promo code. It's the first time we've actually mentioned it is on your show. So you got yourself a premiere, whatever that's called.
An exclusive.
We really hope you guys give this a try. And like I said, you're going to like all these brands and you're going to fall in love with quite a few of them. And when you get this thing and then share with other people, there's something special about that. And that's what we kind of feel like we get to do, that we're kind of opening up the world to some people on some of these great brands. And we feel very lucky to get to play that role. So we're excited. And yes, every lineup's getting crazier and more awesome.
Yeah, I got to say with this one, my favorite is actually probably that Pumpernickel rye from Middle West. I think I mean, I already have a bottle of it because I love it so much. That was a really special bottle. If anyone's not tried that one, either pick it up or pick up this, Blind Barrels tasting set. It's a really, really good rye, even if you're not a rye.
I can't say I have a favorite, but I got to say I always have a bottle of all these at my house, but this gets drank a lot. Yeah, the Pumpernickel rye is just constantly like somebody's over like, you got any more of that Pumpernickel rye? I think I just want to say Pumpernickel, but
I mean, sure, it's fun to say.
yeah, exactly. But it's an amazing whiskey, amazing brand. Like I said, if you see Middle West, buy it, whatever they have, it's worth it.
Definitely. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. Podcast is coming out tomorrow. It's going to be a little bit later than normal. If you guys are not yet following me on whatever podcast platform we use, Bourbon Bites Podcast, where we talk video games and whiskey news. I have a really cool review of a new Irish whiskey that just came out on that one that is finished in Muzanara casks. So definitely check out that episode once it drops tomorrow, probably later in the afternoon. But thank you all so much. Thank you, Bobby. I look forward to talking to you more about future releases from Blind Barrels. And thank you all so much for watching.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye, guys. Cheers.